Honors 10, we're going to begin our flipped classroom for usage for this semester. Today we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. Our goal is to choose the verb that matches the subject. The basic rule of subject-verb agreement is that the subject and verb have to agree in number, meaning if one is singular, the other has to be singular. If the other is plural, if one is plural, the other has to be plural. For the most part, you guys understand this basic rule, but let's look at a few examples to illustrate.
When I look at subject-verb agreement, I look at my subject. Here's my subject is Cindy. That's one person. She's singular. So what I do in my head is substitute in a pronoun that I know is singular, like he. And then I know I can hear which is the singular verb. I would say he is. Is your singular verb. When I look at the second sentence, children is the subject. That's plural. So I can plug in the plural pronoun they. And I would say they are about my age.
All right, so most of the time subject-verb agreement is pretty easy, but there are 7 different ways that subjects can trick us into choosing the wrong verb. So we are going to cover those 7 tricky subjects and the rules to see how we choose the correct subject and verb. The first tricky way we can have a subject is that there could be words in between the subject and the verb, meaning that the subject might be at the beginning of the sentence, and then we could have a phrase that follows it, like a prepositional phrase or in a positive phrase, and then have the verb after that phrase. Something in the phrase might be plural, but the subject might be singular, and since that plural word is closest to the verb, it might trick us into choosing the plural verb when the verb should really be singular if we were to look at the actual subject. Let's take a look at a few examples.
The words between the subject and the verb, I want to make sure that I cross out any prepositional phrase that comes between one of the files includes a prepositional phrase. So my actual subject of the sentence is one, which is singular, which means I should substitute in the word he. Would I say he was or he were? I would say he was. Was is the singular verb. For the second example, again, I need to get rid of the prepositional phrase and look at the true subject, which is women. Women is plural, so I can plug in the pronoun they. Would I say they was or they were? Were is the plural verb.
The second way that subjects can be tricky is if the subject itself is an indefinite pronoun. An indefinite pronoun is a pronoun that refers to something out there but not anything specifically. So they're going to be words like someone or anyone, nothing, everything. And these words can be either singular or plural. Some can actually, the same word can be either singular or plural, but some words are always singular, some words are always plural. The only way for you to know which is to write down a list. Let's take a look at a list and then some examples.
This is a list of your singular indefinite pronouns. I want you guys to write this list down. Anytime we see any one of these words, we need the subject. We know that the subject is singular, and we need the verb to be singular as well. There are some commonalities on this list. You can see that a lot of the words end in the words one, body, or thing. These 4 words are always plural, so when you see these words as the subject, you know you need to use the plural verb. These 6 words can be tricky. We need to take a look at these together. These words can be either singular or plural, depending on how they're used in the sentence. So what you need to do is look at the object of the preposition. For example, in this sentence, most of the Nobel Prizes, most is your subject, but it's referring to the word prizes, which is plural. So I then use the plural verb have. In the second example, I again have most as the subject, but when I look at the object of the preposition, I'm looking at the word money. Money is singular, so here I use the singular verb comes. Now with indefinite pronouns, I need to make sure that I can correctly identify the pronoun as singular or plural from the lists. Each of the girls has or have a pretty prom dress. Again, I've got a prepositional phrase to get rid of, so each. Each is always singular. So that goes with he. He has is my singular verb. For number 2, of my students is again a prepositional phrase, which leaves me with the word several as the true subject. Several is one of the 4 words that's always plural, which means I can plug in the word they, and I would say they want. Now I have 2 sentences where I have to look at the indefinite pronoun that can go either way. So some refers to time. Time is singular, which means some is singular. So I'm going to choose my singular verb is. In the 4th example, some is referring to the word activities, which is plural, which means in this case, some is plural. So I choose the plural verb are.
The third way that subjects can be tricky is if we have a compound subject. The rule with compound subjects depends on the way the compound subjects are joined. If I have 2 subjects joined by the conjunction and, I think of them as plural. But if I have 2 subjects joined by the conjunctions nor or, then the verb needs to agree with the subject that is closest to it in the sentence. Let's look at some examples.
Moving on to compound subjects. The author and the movie producer. When I have 2 subjects here, author and producer, I need to look at the conjunction. These 2 are joined by and, which means it's always plural. So you can plug in the word they, and I would say they are. However, if I change that conjunction, if I have directors or author, if I have an or, I need to look at the one that's closest to the verb. So author is singular, so I would say he is. If I flipped it though, if I had the or and I had to pay attention to directors, which is plural, I would then have to say they are in charge.
Numbers are our next confusing subject. We need to think of the way the number acts in a sentence. If the number is considered one whole, it's singular. If the number is individual parts, it is plural. Usually they're going to be singular, but let's look at an example.
When I look at numbers, I need to determine if the number is acting as one or considering it as individual parts. When I look at half of my class is one element, so that becomes singular. So which one matches with he? He is.
The next way subjects can be confusing is if they are collective nouns. Collective nouns are words that refer to a large group of people, like a class or a jury or a flock of birds. And these collective nouns can also be either singular or plural, depending on the way that the noun is acting. So if the class is doing all one thing together, they're singular. But if the class breaks up and does different things, small group projects, acting as individuals within a large group, then we consider them plural. We have to look at clues within the sentence to help us tell how the noun is acting. Let's look at some examples.
Collective nouns can be the trickiest of the 7 tricks. Jury. In both of these examples, my subject is jury, but we have to look at how the noun is functioning, and you look for other clues in the sentence. In this case, jury is coming to its decision. I have one decision, and I have a singular pronoun with it, so I know that jury then is singular, so I would plug in he. He has. However, in the second example, I have a plural pronoun in there. They're clearly doing something different. And I have plural opinions, which means they're acting separately, making them plural in this case, where I would plug in they, and then I would say they fight.
The sixth way that subjects can be tricky for us is if the subject is preceded by the words every or many a. The rule here is that no matter what, if it's preceded by the word every or many a, it is always singular.
Every and many a are always singular. So many a tells me that no matter what comes next, it's singular. So I would say he thinks that the first few days are the hardest.
Lastly, and perhaps the most difficult trick, is subject-verb agreement within a clause. Sometimes a clause begins with what's called a relative pronoun. So the pronoun of the clause, the beginning word of the clause, like who or that, needs to agree with the verb in the clause. But we don't know if the pronoun, like who or that, is singular or plural until we look at what the clause modifies. So first we have to find out what the clause modifies, look at if that word is singular or plural, and then choose the correct verb within the clause. Let's look at a few examples of this too.
We need to look at the clause, who is or are injured, and we need to determine what that's modifying. It's not modifying the team, it's modifying the players. So the subject and the verb of the clause are who and either is or are. So I need to determine if who is singular or plural based on what it modifies. Since players is plural, that means who is plural. So then I would say who are injured. However, in the second example, my clause is here, who always beat or beats us. And that's describing the school. The school who always beats us. So since school is singular, then I have a singular pronoun with who, which means I need the singular pronoun he beats.